The Nintendo Entertainment System and Famicom have nearly 1,400 officially licensed games released for it. Most are original titles, but a large number were arcade ports. So let's take a look at some of these arcade ports and find out which ones are good and which ones are terrible. Starting with Arch Rivals. This is a 2-on-2 basket brawl game that precedes NBA Jam, where you can choose from different teams and characters. You can punch your opponent to steal the ball, and it's perfectly legal. I like the cartoony graphics and the cutscenes between the baskets. The music and sound effects are also pretty good. Gameplay is also fun, and the opponent AI actually gives you a chance. Unlike the NES game, where the AI is absolutely relentless, as soon as I get the ball, that freaking guard is right on me trying to take it. And if I pass, he frequently steals it and immediately makes another basket. What the heck? This game really needed a difficulty setting. The graphics and sounds are okay considering the system limitations, but there's absolutely no voice. The arcade game is pretty fun, but this version is terribly frustrating thanks to the extreme difficulty. Dislike. Bad Dudes. I think the full name of this game is Bad Dudes vs. Dragon Ninja, but we all just call it Bad Dudes. It's a side-scrolling action game where you punch and kick your way through multiple stages on a quest to save the president. I remember playing this a ton at my arcade in Winter Haven, Florida, called Gimme Games. Me and my friends would all gather around the game and play it. It was cool. The gameplay is rather repetitive, but at least the graphics and sounds are good. I especially like it when the character says, "I'm bad!" The NES game is quite a chore. The most noticeable problem is the choppy animation of your character. It just makes me queasy for some reason. Obviously, the graphics took a huge hit, as did the "I'm bad" voice effect. I'm bad. Ugh. Then check out the truck stage. What is that water in between the trucks? It just looks so weird. Then the fourth stage has this super slow up and down scrolling. Ah, so annoying. This isn't a great conversion of the game, but hey, if you need to play Bad Dudes at home, this would have sufficed back in the day. I'll give it a mild like. I'm bad. BurgerTime. Yes, BurgerTime. One of my favorites. Play as Peter Pepper, stomping your dirty feet all over the top of hamburgers, buns, lettuce, tomato, and cheese to make the perfect burger. All the while being chased by burger-hating hot dogs, eggs, and pickles. Seriously, why would they even care? Are they upset that they aren't on the burger or something? I really like the Nintendo version. It looks and plays very much like the arcade. I'd have been blown away by this conversion if all I had was the Atari 2600 version. My only issue is the lack of color. I mean, couldn't they have used a better color than green on the burger patties? Ugh. But otherwise, I love the NES port. Caveman Ninja. A side-scrolling action game where you set off on a quest to save your cave women from an enemy tribe. There are several weapons like arrowheads, boomerangs, stone wheels, and a new one I discovered, the Shadow Attack. This was the best one, and I wonder if it only appears in later revisions of the game. I really do wish that the stages were a bit longer, because it's just not long enough before you encounter a tough-to-beat boss. Well, it does get easier if you know what to do, but my caveman brain takes far too long to figure things out. Like the other home ports, the NES game is called Joe and Mac, and it doesn't really feel like the arcade game at all. It does have some nice and colorful graphics, though. The background scrolling is also quite impressive. The enemies are much smaller, but at least they attempt to make the main boss gigantic and scary. They're all super tough to beat though, and I had to use the Game Genie just to show you the different stages. Tough game, but not bad. I like it. Contra, the definitive side-scrolling run-and-gun action game. Did I say run-and-gun? Run-and-gun action game. You take on the persona of a macho beefcake on a mission to destroy the evil alien Red Falcon and his island lair. The graphics, sounds, and music are really good, but the vertically oriented screen was a strange choice. I find the game to be fairly easy except for one problem. You're only allowed 3 continues. What the heck? The NES game improves on the original one in every way except for the graphics, and some would even say that the NES game looks better too. The controls are absolutely perfect. If you die, you know it's totally your fault. The arcade stages are all there, and they've been extended. Oh, and there's some new stages as well. Konami really pulled out all the stops for this conversion. More than just your basic port, NES Contra is an institution and one of the best games of all time. I love it! Dig Dug. Hey there, little blue Dig Dug dude. How does your garden grow? By digging holes under it and exploding the pukas and figars? What? Okay, sure, I get it. You don't want those guys messing things up. But is blasting them with an air pump really the best way to get rid of them? How about just using some mousetraps instead? Oh, so I see your game also appeared on the Nintendo Famicom, even though I can play it on the NES. The colors here aren't quite as good, but your game plays just about the same. The music is also just about perfect too. So you can be proud of this version, even if the original game is the best. Donkey Kong. What hasn't been said about this game? It's a classic. Rescue the kidnapped Pauline from Donkey Kong across 4 different stages. Jump over barrels, avoid foxfires, springs, and cement pies. You know, I always wondered what happened to Pauline after this game. She and Mario seemed to have a falling out. Maybe she realized that Donkey Kong was better after all. For the NES game, Nintendo was able to faithfully recreate the look and feel of the arcade, even though it is missing the cement factory stage. Thankfully, they did add it back in for the 25th anniversary original edition for the European Wii systems. Another thing that bothers me is that the stage order doesn't match the US arcade version. Instead, we get the Japanese arcade stage order. Come on, man. But otherwise, this is a great port, and I love it. Double Dragon. The first really popular beat-em-up has you out to rescue your girlfriend from the Shadow Warriors. You remember what her name is? I do. Anyway, you and your brother are the Double Dragons. Get it? Double, because they're brothers and there's 2 of them? Or whatever. There are multiple stages with really great graphics. Well, for the time anyway. There's also lots of different attacks that can be performed. The NES game is kind of controversial. Its biggest sin is that it's only 1 player, so shouldn't they have called it Single Dragon? Also, you don't get all the moves up front, you have to earn them. I guess they wanted to add more depth to the game? I don't know. The other limitation is that there can only be 2 enemies of the same type on screen at once. Jeez, this is really starting to feel like a lazy port. But you know what? Even with all those issues, I still find this version of Double Dragon to be very enjoyable. I really like it. Dragon Spirit. a fantasy-inspired top-down shooting game where you play as a dragon, I guess. Your dragon can be upgraded to have multiple heads for double or triple shots. In addition to the aerial targets, there are also some on the ground that you can attack with fireballs. It's very similar to Xevious in that sense. Kinda strange, since both of these games are from Namco. What I really don't care for is the 2-hit deaths. It's very frustrating. The NES game is actually a sequel of sorts called The New Legend. This one has more stages, and if you die on the first stage, you get a Gold Dragon Easy mode, which allows you to skip a few stages and gives you rapid fire. Now that's something I like. Otherwise, it's pretty tough playing as the normal Blue Dragon. Graphics are much weaker than the original game, but the gameplay is still fun. I like it. Elevator action. Here's another one of my favorites. Play as a spy shooting other spies while searching for secret documents in a high-rise building using the elevators to escape. Controls can be a little tricky when going down the escalators, but you get used to it. Blasting the enemy spies is fun, but my favorite is when you get to crush them on the elevator. It doesn't happen very often, but it's pretty fun when you get to do it. The NES port is fantastic. It really captures the look and feel of the arcade game. The graphics aren't as sharp and the music is a little weaker, but it's still a good time. I'd have been so excited to own this back in the day. I love it. Galaxian. It's a shame, but I feel that this prequel to Galaga has been largely forgotten. Sure, not by us hardcore gamers, but by the population in general. Of course, this was the evolution of Space Invaders, except this time you're chasing them down in space and they're turning to fight back. The sound effects in this game are just iconic, and it really brings back that nostalgic feeling of the arcades for me. Now, this was not released for the North American NES, however, there is a port for the Famicom, and it really looks and sounds just like the arcade game. The main difference, of course, is the lower resolution, but I can forgive that if the game plays like the original, and it does. Galaxian is an enjoyable game, but it does get a little repetitive over time. Still, I like this conversion. Gauntlet. The smash hit game from Atari Games, this is one of the first created after the split from the home division of Atari Corp. It has you play as a wizard, Valkyrie, warrior, or an elf in an endless series of dungeons. Various enemies will come at you, and you must destroy their bases to stop them. Along the way, you can find some screen-clearing magic potions, food to extend your life, and gold for points. Lastly, did you know that Ernie Facelius is the voice of the narrator? He's probably best known for creating the Star Wars parody Hardware Wars. Huh, who knew?
Warrior is about to die.
The home port for the NES is an absolute classic in my book. Despite the much less interesting visuals, it's actually a more involved game. This version tasks you with defeating the enemy named Morak and has more potions and mazes to get through. There are 5 total worlds to conquer, and there's a password so that you don't have to beat it all in one session. Once you have all the clues, you can get to the final stage to defeat Morak. The This is a great game, and I love it. Guerrilla War. A top-down action game similar to Ikari Warriors. This one also used a joystick that can be twisted to point your character in 8 different directions. Unfortunately, that makes playing at home challenging to set up the controls. You can see I was struggling here to capture some footage. Anyway, your mission is to battle through the jungle, saving prisoners and collecting weapons. The game has some nice graphics and sounds, and I like how you can jump in a tank and start blasting the enemies. The NES game is an underappreciated gem in my opinion. This one lives in the shadow of Ikari Warriors and Commando, but it's just as fun, if not more so. The graphics and gameplay are great, and the music is decent enough. The game does feel a little fast though, and I started to wonder if I was playing a PAL ROM, but no, this is how it is. This is a really fun game. I love it. Karate Champ. Is this the first arcade one-on-one fighting game? I always thought it was.
Half point.
Anyway, in this game, you hope to win over a cute girl by beating up her boyfriend. I think that's what's going on in this game.
Full point.
The control scheme was experimental as it used dual joysticks instead of buttons. It did afford the player with quite a few moves, though.
Half point.
You advanced based on a point system. Remember the tournament in The Karate Kid? Yeah, it's like that.
Half point.
Gameplay is a little slow, but it was popular enough to warrant an NES game, and it looks quite a bit better than the arcade with more detailed graphics if you ask me. The controls are quite a bit different since there's no dual joysticks here. Instead, you use a combination of directions and button presses, which means that all the training you did on the arcade game was for nothing. This is a decent conversion of a rather dull game, and I'll give it a mild like. Kung Fu Master. Now this is more like it. This one is a side-scrolling action game where you kick and punch your way to the top of the castle to rescue your girlfriend. What's her name? Yeah, that's it. This game is very satisfying when you kick an enemy in the face. Take that! The visuals are nice, but what I don't care for is the extreme difficulty. I wasn't even able to get to the boss this time. Dang it. I really hate how the enemies sap your strength if they touch you. Fight like a man! This was one of the original Nintendo black box games, and it's simply called Kung Fu. As expected, it can't compare in terms of graphics, but it does play well. Actually, I find it a little bit easier than the arcade game, and that's something I appreciate. I also think the voice effects in this version are very well done. This is a decent game, and I like it. NARC. This is one of the earliest games I remember that used digitized graphics. And if I remember right, the programmer of Q*bert, Warren Davis, created the technology for digitizing those graphics. You play as a fully armed narcotics officer out to clean up the streets, blast the crooks with your semi-automatic weapons and rocket launchers. I don't know, there's something really satisfying about blasting those drug dealers. I only wish I could drive the Porsche for more than 10 feet before crashing. Now let's look at the Nintendo version. This game is a total abomination on the NES. The graphics and sounds are absolutely pathetic. There's hardly any detail in the visuals. Also, there's never more than 3 enemies on the screen at once. Oh man, how I wish this had been released for the Genesis or Super Nintendo. I hate the Nintendo port, but I do love the arcade game. Next is the classic of classics, Pac-Man. Run around a maze, eat dots, avoid ghosts, eat power pellets, eat ghosts, eat fruit, clear the board, and repeat. This game is still fun even after all these years. NES game is an excellent conversion. It looks and sounds the part, even if the color is a little off and the characters are a little bit bigger. This certainly blows the doors off the Atari 2600 Pac-Man. I love it! Paperboy. I think of this as being the world's first work simulator. All you do is ride your bike delivering papers and avoiding obstacles. I love the isometric graphics and all the little details along the way.
I live a life of danger.
Smash windows, avoid dogs, stop burglars, smack breakdancers, avoid cars, and more. What's really cool about the original arcade game is the handlebar controller. That's something you're not going to see on any other arcade game.
Whoa, where am I?
The home game for the NES isn't too bad. It still retains that isometric view, and the scrolling is diagonal just like the arcade. Not really sure how they did that. Some programming trickery there for sure. The house colors are kind of boring. Why are the bad houses red now instead of a dark gray? They're also far less detailed, and that's to be expected, I guess. Overall, I don't hate this port, but I'd really rather just play the original. I'll give it a mild like. Popeye. Did you know that Popeye was the game Nintendo wanted to do before Donkey Kong? Oh, you knew that already? I guess I've told that story before. Okay, anyway, the arcade game is rather unique. You roam around the stage collecting objects from olive oil, all the while running from Bluto and avoiding the Sea Witch's bottles. Get the spinach to become invincible and knock out Bluto. That's so much fun. Now, Popeye was released for a variety of home systems by Parker Brothers, and I played the Atari 8-bit computer game endlessly. But I gotta admit, the NES port is one of the best. It's fast, fun, and has all the graphics and sounds of the arcade. It also plays great too. I love this port. P.O.W. Prisoners of War. This is a side-scrolling beat-em-up where you escape from a POW camp. Similar to other beat-em-ups, there's a variety of attacks you can perform. Punches, kicks, flying kicks, backhand attacks, and such like that. But what I like best is when you get the gun. It's so much easier to blast those enemies than it is to punch them. Take that! The punching attacks just feel a little off. The hit detection is just not great. The Nintendo game's hit detection also feels a little off. I guess they were going for accuracy here? I don't know. This is a pretty good conversion. I really like the variety in the graphics. They all look very detailed. The music is okay, but it gets a little grating on my ears. This is another game that I feel gets overlooked, and I really like it. Rampart, an action puzzle hybrid game where you defend your castle against incoming ships. First you place your cannons, and then you attack those incoming ships. Naturally, they're going to attack back, damaging your castle walls, which you have to repair using Tetris-style pieces. The time you have to place your pieces is very limited, so you have to be fast. Of course, the piece you get is never going to be the right size or fit the way you want it to. Ugh. I was very impressed by the Nintendo port. Aside from the expectedly weaker visuals, the gameplay is all here. It also has some very nice voice to go with it. I did find it to be quite a bit easier than the arcade, which I always appreciate since I stink at video games. One thing I noticed is that the ships are also quite a bit more erratic and faster than the arcade, making them a bit harder to hit. This is a very good version of one of my favorite Atari games. Love it! RoadBlasters. Another favorite, this one has you racing along and blasting enemies on the road while collecting enough fuel to reach the finish line. It reminds me a little bit of Mad Max, but without the apocalyptic setting. The key to this game is your multiplier. When you hit an enemy car, it will increase. When you miss, it will drop one. When you finish the race, your reserve fuel tank will fill up based on your total score. Sometimes that reserve tank will get you down the road just enough to make the finish line.
Reserve fuel awarded based on score.
Strangely enough, the Nintendo game appeared under the Mindscape label. I imagine when Atari Games licensed it, they suddenly realized they needed to be making the games themselves, and thus Tengen was born. This is a really fun port. It's got good scrolling, fast gameplay, and good sound effects. Naturally, the voice is missing, but otherwise, this is a good conversion, and I love it. Rolling Thunder. In this awesome side-scrolling shooter, you play as Albatross on a mission to stop a secret society called Geldra. Okay, yeah, sure, if that works. I've never really cared much about the story, I just like the game. It kind of reminds me of Shinobi and elevator action mixed together. You can upgrade your weapon by going into certain doors, but of course when you go in, the enemies are just going to wait right outside and bump you, causing you to lose a hit. 2 hits and you have to start over. Come on, man. This is mostly a memorization game, but it does require some skill to get past some of the enemies. The NES port is fantastic, at least in the gameplay and sound departments. It plays very much like the original game. Gameplay is very fluid and the enemies are just as annoying. You can hide behind crates or just inside of a door too. I find this to be a really good conversion, and I love it. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. One of the most popular beat-em-ups of all time, features all 4 of the Turtles. John, Paul, George, and Ringo, of course. All kidding aside, wouldn't it be cool if there was a Beatles beat-em-up? I really love the style of this game. It looks just like the cartoon. Each of the turtles has their own signature weapon and sense of humor. Gameplay is admittedly very repetitive, but the story more than makes up for it. And who wouldn't want to play as their favorite characters? I've always kind of been partial to Ringo myself. Definitely one of the best, if not the best, Turtles game of all time. I do remember rushing out to buy the NES game the moment it was released. I didn't really care much for the original Nintendo game, but I wanted this one so much. I remember it came with a coupon for a free personal pan pizza from Pizza Hut, and yes, I used it. Anyway, the gameplay is very enjoyable and very similar to the arcade. There's even some extra stages, which is a nice bonus. Still one of my favorite games in my collection, and I love it. Toki. Now here's an odd one. Your girlfriend has been kidnapped by an evil sorcerer who also turns you into a monkey. To save her, you must shoot enemies with spitballs, jump on seesaws, blast monkey-powered statues, and avoid ghosts, spiders, and defeat the voodoo bosses. This game is totally weird. But despite all that, it's still a pretty fun game with great controls and nice visuals. The The NES version is surprisingly good. First thing I noticed though was the great music. It's very catchy and similar to the original. The stage layout is also very close to the arcade. What I really love about Toki is the variety. There's many different stages, enemies, and even weapons to choose from. It's not an easy game, but it's still very fun. I really love this conversion. Vindicators. How many arcade tank games can you name that use dual controls? Including this one, I can think of just 4, and 3 of them are by Atari. The goal here is to destroy the 14 enemy space stations. Along the way to the control room, you'll encounter enemy tanks, turrets, and floating enemies, to name just a few. Collect stars to buy upgrades, and drive over fuel pods to keep your tank functioning. Now, I do own the NES game. I remember buying it just because it was by Atari Games, and I thought it looked pretty cool. I don't remember if I had played the arcade back then, but I probably did. This game is fun for a while, but I noticed that the stages start to repeat, and I got to thinking the game was just like any other Atari game that would just never end. The music is pretty good, but the repetitive and plain graphics just put me off. Still a pretty fun game though, and I like it. Okay, well there you have it. Just a few of the many arcade ports that appeared on the Nintendo Entertainment System. This is just the first of many videos on this topic, so stay tuned if I didn't mention your favorite game. Thank you for watching, take care, and we'll see you next time. Bye bye everyone.